Taiwan shivered as the cold ocean spray hit his face. The beach was empty this early morning, just as he preferred. He adjusted his research equipment and continued collecting samples of the unusual alga bloom he'd been studying for weeks. The university grant had given him this isolated stretch of coastline all to himself, perfect for a marine biologist who had recently gone through a painful divorce and needed solitude. The tide had receded farther than usual, revealing dark rocks normally hidden beneath the waves. Something glinted among them, something that didn't belong. Taiwan frowned, setting down his collection tubes. "What is that?" he muttered, making his way across the wet sand. At first, he thought it might be trash washed ashore, perhaps a refrigerator or small boat debris. But as he got closer, he realized it was unlike anything he'd ever seen. A metallic pod, roughly the size of a small car, half buried in sand. Its surface was smooth and silvery blue, without seams or markings. It didn't look manufactured, more like it had grown that way. Taiwan circled it cautiously. "This isn't possible," he said to himself. The object wasn't damaged or corroded despite being in salt water. He reached out, hesitant, and touched the surface. It was warm. The moment his fingers made contact, a line of light appeared along the pod's surface. Taiwan jumped back as the light widened, becoming a seam. With a soft hiss, the top section of the pod lifted. Inside lay a woman, or something that looked almost like a woman. Her skin had a purple undertone with small patches that caught the sunlight like tiny embedded apples. Her features were almost human but slightly wrong. Eyes a bit too large, fingers a bit too long. Dark liquid that might have been blood had dried along her temple. "My God," Taiwan whispered. Scientific curiosity warred with basic human concern. She was injured, unconscious, but clearly not human. Should he call authorities? The military? The woman's chest rose and fell gently. She was alive. Dark clouds gathered overhead. A storm was coming. Taiwan looked around the empty beach, then back at the strange woman. If he left her here, the tide would return soon. If he called someone, what would they do to her? "I can't believe I'm doing this," he muttered, carefully lifting her from the pod. She was surprisingly light, almost weightless in his arms. Her skin felt smooth but different from human skin, more like polished stone that somehow remained flexible. Taiwan carried her up the beach path to his small research cabin. Rain began to fall as he shouldered open the door and placed her on his bed. Her clothing was strange, a single piece that seemed to shift colors slightly as it dried. He cleaned the wound on her temple with a first aid kit, noting the dark purple-blue of her blood. Her pulse was steady but faster than a human's, like a small bird's heartbeat. The storm intensified outside. Taiwan knew he should go back for the pod before someone else found it, but he couldn't leave her alone. What if she woke up? What if her condition worsened? He paced the small cabin, occasionally checking on the unconscious visitor. Night fell. The wound on her head was already healing, far faster than any human injury would. "Who are you?" he whispered, not expecting an answer. "What are you?" Around midnight, as rain pounded the cabin roof, her eyes suddenly opened. They were entirely silver, no whites, no pupils, just liquid silver that seemed to glow from within. She bolted upright with a sharp intake of breath. Taiwan stumbled back, knocking over his chair. "It's okay," he said, holding up his hands. "You're safe." The woman spoke, her voice musical and complex, forming sounds no human throat could make. She looked around wildly, then focused on Taiwan. Fear was clear in those strange silver eyes. "I won't hurt you," Taiwan said slowly, pointing to himself. "I found you. On the beach." He gestured toward the ocean. She touched her healed temple, then looked at Taiwan again. She spoke more words he couldn't understand, but her tone had changed, questioning rather than frightened. Taiwan pointed to himself again. "Taiwan," he said clearly. The woman watched him for a long moment. Then she touched her own chest. The sound she made was impossible for Taiwan to pronounce, like water bubbling over stones. She tried again, simplifying it. Sunhai, she said, the closest human approximation of her name. Sunhai, Taiwan repeated. A tentative connection formed between them, the first bridge across an unimaginable gulf. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Taiwan showed Sunhai a glass of water. She examined it, then drank gratefully. He offered food, but she shook her head. Through gestures, he explained finding her on the beach. She seemed to understand, nodding slowly. When he mentioned the pod, she became agitated, making urgent motions toward the ocean. The pod, Taiwan asked. You want me to get it? She nodded vigorously. Tomorrow, he promised, mimicking sleep and then pointing to the window. When it's light. The storm is too dangerous now. Sunhei seemed to accept this, settling back onto the bed. She watched Taiwan with those silver eyes, wariness mixed with something like curiosity. Neither of them slept that night, the human and the visitor from somewhere beyond the stars, each wondering what the dawn would bring. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wooden floor of the cabin as Taiwan spread out his collection of drawings. For 3 days, he had worked with Sunhei to build a simple language. Progress was slow but steady. Food, he asked, holding up a bowl of rice. They had established this routine, naming objects, building vocabulary word by word. Sunhei nodded, taking the bowl. She had adapted quickly to human food, though she seemed to prefer anything from the sea. Fish disappeared from her plate faster than any other food. The alien pod sat hidden in the storage shed behind the cabin. Taiwan had dragged it there the morning after Sunhei woke up. Inside, he found nothing except strange devices with no obvious purpose. He dared not touch them too much, fearing he might break something important. Water, he asked, offering a glass. Water, Sunhei repeated, her voice musical even when speaking human words. She drank deeply, then pointed to the window where rain tapped against the glass. Water. Taiwan nodded. Yes, rain is water too. An idea struck him. He reached for his tablet computer and opened an educational diagram of the water cycle he used when teaching university students. The simple illustration showed rain falling from clouds to the ocean, then evaporating back up. Rain, he said, pointing to the droplets in the image. Ocean. Cloud. Sunhei's silver eyes widened. She tapped the ocean in the diagram excitedly, then pointed to herself, then back to the ocean image. Taiwan frowned. You, from ocean? He asked, knowing she wouldn't understand his full question. She shook her head, frustrated. Then she took the tablet from his hands. Her long fingers moved across the screen with surprising skill. Within moments, she had opened the drawing application and was creating an image, a planet, mostly covered in blue water, with 3 small moons circling it. Your world? Taiwan asked, pointing to the drawing. Sunhei nodded eagerly. For the next 2 hours, they communicated through pictures. Sunhei drew her water planet again, then sketched unusual sea creatures that lived in its oceans. Next, she drew Earth with its single moon, then drew the same creatures in Earth's oceans. Same animals. That's impossible, Taiwan said. Sunhei ignored his confusion. She continued drawing, creating an image of a spacecraft, not like her small pod, but larger and more threatening. Then she drew angular, tall figures with too many limbs. Her hand trembled as she drew these beings. She pointed to these figures and made a slashing motion across her throat. Bad. Dangerous. Taiwan asked. Sunhei nodded vigorously. She pointed to the ocean creatures in her previous drawings and made the same slashing gesture. They want to hurt the sea life, he asked, struggling to understand. The alien woman's face showed clear frustration. What she wanted to explain was clearly more complex than their simple picture words could express. That evening, while Sunhei rested, Ta-1 studied their drawings again. His scientific mind worked through the possibilities. The sea creatures she had drawn looked remarkably similar to species he studied in his research. This couldn't be coincidence. His laptop chimed with a news alert. The headline made his heart race. Unknown objects spotted over coastal waters. Government investigation underway. The blurry photo showed a dark, angular craft hovering above the ocean, just 50 miles from his cabin. It matched Sun He's drawing of the dangerous spacecraft. "Sun Hai," he called urgently. "Look at this." She came to his side, still moving with that strange grace that seemed almost like floating. When she saw the image on the screen, her silver eyes widened in fear. She made the throat-slashing gesture again. "They're here, aren't they?" Ta-1 asked. "The ones you're afraid of." Sun He nodded, then pointed to herself and mimicked hiding. "Yes, we need to hide you," Ta-1 agreed. He closed his laptop and began checking that all curtains were drawn. That night, they sat in the dim light of a single lamp. Ta-1 tried a new approach to communication. He pointed to himself. "Ta-1," he said clearly, then pointed to her. "Sun Hai." She understood, pointing to herself. Then she made a series of musical sounds, her true name in her language. It was beautiful but impossible for human vocal cords to reproduce. Ta-1 smiled. "I'll stick with Sun Hai for now." He pointed to the tablet with the drawing of her world. "Where? How far?" Sun Hai looked thoughtful. She drew stars, many stars, then circled one particular area of the screen. She couldn't express the concept of light years or galaxies, but Ta-1 understood the message. Very, very far away. "Why here?" he asked, pointing to an image of Earth. "Why our oceans?" Sun He drew again, connecting lines between her ocean creatures and the stars themselves. She drew energy flowing from the animals to the cosmos. Ta-1 stared at the drawing, his scientific mind racing. Was she suggesting that Earth's marine life somehow affected space itself? It seemed impossible, yet Sun Hai was living proof that his understanding of the universe was incomplete. A sound outside made them both freeze. Headlights swept across the curtained windows as a vehicle pulled up to the cabin. Sun He's eyes reflected fear in the dim light. Ta-1 motioned for her to hide in the small storage cellar he had shown her earlier. As she slipped away, he moved to the window and carefully peered out. A black government SUV sat in his driveway. Two men in suits stepped out, looking up at his cabin. They had found him. But how? And what did they know about the visitor he was hiding? Ta-1 switched off all the lights in the cabin and moved quietly to the door. Through the peephole, he watched the two men in black suits approach. Behind them stood a third figure, taller, thinner, moving in a way that seemed somehow wrong. "Stay hidden," he whispered to Sun Hai, who had already slipped into the hidden cellar beneath the kitchen floor. The knock, when it came, was firm and official. Ta-1 counted to 10, composing himself, then opened the door just enough to see out. "Dr. Kim." The first man smiled professionally. "I'm Agent Lee from the National Intelligence Service. May we come in?" "It's very late," Ta-1 replied, blocking the doorway. "What is this about?" "We're conducting a survey of coastal residents regarding unusual sightings," Agent Lee explained. "Won't take much of your time." The tall figure behind the agents shifted slightly. Even in the darkness, Ta-1 could tell something wasn't right about its proportions. "I haven't seen anything unusual," Ta-1 said. "Just been focused on my research." "Our foreign colleague is particularly interested in marine biology." Agent Lee gestured to the tall figure. "When we learned of your work here, he was eager to meet you." The tall figure stepped forward into the porch light. Though dressed in a dark suit like the agent's, its appearance made Ta-1's skin crawl. The face was almost human, but wrong, like someone who had only seen pictures of humans trying to construct a disguise. Its movements were too smooth, too precise. It spoke, the sound like stones grinding together. Agent Lee nodded as if he understood. He asks if you've observed any unusual marine specimens recently. Tai-1's heart raced, but he kept his expression neutral. Nothing out of the ordinary, just standard research on local ecosystems. The tall visitor stared at Tai-1. Its eyes behind dark glasses reflected light oddly, like a cat's eyes. Perhaps we could see your research facility, Agent Lee suggested. I'm afraid that's not possible, Tai-1 said firmly. University regulations. All research is confidential until published. The visitor made another grinding sound. Agent Lee frowned slightly. Our colleague is quite insistent, he said. It would only take a moment. I'd need approval from my department chair. Tai-1 held his ground. I can't risk my grant funding by breaking protocols. As they spoke, Tai-1 noticed the visitor's head tilting, nostrils flaring. It was smelling the air, searching. We understand, Agent Lee finally said, though his companion seemed less satisfied. Here's my card. Please contact us if you observe anything unusual. As they turned to leave, the visitor suddenly stopped. It looked back at the cabin, its head moving in an unnatural way. It inhaled deeply through barely visible slits where a human nose would be, then made a low rumbling sound. Only when their black SUV disappeared down the coastal road did Tai-1 close the door, his hands shaking. Sun-Hai, he called softly. They're gone. The cellar door opened and Sun-Hai emerged. Her silver eyes were wide with fear. They smell me, she said in her improved but still broken English. Not human. Coal hunter. Coal. Tai-1 repeated. Is that what they're called? The ones after you. Sun-Hai nodded. Coal take, destroy. She made the throat-slashing gesture again. Must leave. Not safe here. Tai-1 turned on his laptop. More news alerts had appeared. Reports of diplomatic visitors arriving in major cities worldwide. The official story claimed they were representatives from an advanced civilization offering technological exchange. These visitors, he showed Sun-Hai the screen. They're the coal. She looked at the images and nodded vigorously. Even in their human disguises, she recognized them. How many? Tai-1 asked. Sun-Hai drew a large ship on the tablet, then many smaller ones. She pointed upward. Many. Come for ocean treasures. Tai-1 didn't fully understand, but the fear in her eyes was clear enough. What do we do? Sun-Hai pointed to her pod in the shed. Need this. Then she drew a map indicating mountains far inland. Person there can help. You know someone here. On Earth. She shook her head, then drew a simple radio tower and made wave motions with her hands. Signal. Send message. Home. Tai-1 understood. She needed to reach someone who could help her send a message to her people. We leave tonight, he decided. Pack only what we need. They worked quickly, gathering supplies. Tai-1 collected his research data, emergency cash, and basic necessities. Sun-Hai carefully removed several devices from her pod and placed them in a backpack. As dawn approached, they loaded Tai-1's old Jeep. Sun-Hai wore a hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses to hide her alien features. It wouldn't stand up to close inspection, but it might help them avoid immediate notice. The news says the visitors are peaceful, Tai-1 said, as they prepared to leave. But you're saying they're dangerous. What do they really want? Sun-Hai looked out at the ocean, her expression sad. Water life connects stars, she said, struggling with the complex concept. Coal take connection, sell it. Oceans die after. Our marine life affects the stars. Tai-1 asked, amazed. Is that what you're saying? She nodded. Big web. All connected. Coal break web for profit. The implications were staggering. If she was right, these diplomatic visitors planned to harvest something vital from Earth's oceans, something that would devastate not just Earth, but other systems somehow connected to it. A helicopter thudded in the distance, growing closer. Time to go, Tai-1 said, starting the Jeep. As they pulled away from the cabin, Sun-Hai looked back at the ocean one last time. Her silver eyes reflected both fear and determination. Whatever these coal hunters wanted, she was resolved to stop them. And now, so was Ta-One. Ta-One drove the old jeep along back roads, avoiding main highways where cameras might spot them. The sun rose behind mountains to the east, casting long shadows across the land. They had been driving for 6 hours, stopping only for fuel at the smallest, most remote gas stations. "Are you okay?" Ta-One asked, glancing at Sun-Hai. She nodded, though her silver eyes looked dull. The hoodie covered most of her unusual features, and the sunglasses hid her eyes, but her skin had lost some of its healthy glow. "Need water," she said simply. "Not drink. Need. Touch water." Ta-One frowned, then understood. "You need to be in water." She nodded again. Energy. Connection. He studied the worn paper map spread across his lap. They were heading toward the mountains where his old friend Jihu worked at a military research facility. If anyone would believe their story and help them, it would be Jihu. But they were still a day's drive away. "There's a lake about 20 miles from here," Ta-One said, pointing to a blue spot on the map. "Will that work?" Sun-Hai looked at the map and nodded eagerly. "Any water helps. Ocean best. Lake good." They turned onto an even smaller road, barely more than a dirt track through thick forest. After several miles, they saw the lake through the trees, a small, clear body of water nestled in a valley. Ta-One parked the jeep behind thick bushes, hiding it from the road. "No one seems to be around, but be quick." Sun-Hai didn't wait. She hurried to the water's edge and waded in without hesitation, clothes and all. Then she submerged completely, disappearing beneath the surface. Ta-One waited anxiously, scanning their surroundings. 1 minute passed. 2. 3. Just as he was about to panic, Sun-Hai resurfaced in the middle of the lake. Her skin glowed with renewed energy, and even from a distance, her smile was radiant. She swam back to shore with incredible speed and grace. When she stepped out of the water, she was completely dry. The water seemed to slide off her skin and clothes as if repelled. "Better," she said, her voice stronger. "Lake knows me now." "Knows you?" Ta-One asked. Sun-Hai struggled to explain. "My people connect with water. All water connected. Like," she pointed to his phone, "internet but older, deeper." Before Ta-One could ask more questions, the sound of an engine growled in the distance. He grabbed Sun-Hai's arm and pulled her down behind a large fallen tree. A black SUV like the one that had come to his cabin drove slowly past on the main road, about 100 yards away. Through the trees, Ta-One could make out 2 human agents and one of the 2 tall figures. "A coal hunter. They're looking for us," he whispered. "How did they find us so quickly?" Sun-Hai pointed to herself. "Track water use. Feel ripples when I connect." They waited until the SUV was well out of sight before returning to the jeep. As they prepared to leave, Sun-Hai suddenly placed her hand on the vehicle's hood and closed her eyes. Water droplets formed on her palm, then seemed to sink into the metal. "What are you doing?" Ta-One asked. "Hide us," she replied. "Water bend light. Make hard to see." When they pulled back onto the road, Ta-One noticed a strange effect, like heat waves, surrounding the jeep. It didn't make them invisible, but it did make the vehicle harder to focus on, as if the light around them was being gently distorted. They drove for hours more, stopping only when necessary. At one point, they encountered a police roadblock. Ta-One's heart sank. There was no way around it. "Problem," he said, slowing the jeep. Sun-Hai looked at the officers ahead, then at a drainage pipe running under the road near the checkpoint. She placed her palm on the dashboard and whispered something in her own musical language. Suddenly, the pipe burst with a spray of water, creating a small geyser that shot 20 feet into the air. All the officers rushed to deal with the unexpected flood. In the confusion, Ta-One was able to drive past the checkpoint without being stopped. "Did you do that?" he asked in amazement once they were clear. "Water helps protectors," Sunhai said simply. That night, they stopped in a dense forest, too tired to continue. Taiwan was afraid to use motels or campgrounds where they might be spotted. They ate cold food from their supplies and prepared to sleep in the jeep. As Taiwan tried to get comfortable in the driver's seat, he noticed Sunhai standing outside, her hands raised to the night sky. Around her, small droplets of water hung in the air, catching moonlight like tiny stars. "What are you doing?" he asked softly, joining her. "Sending message," she replied. "Water carries words to others like me. There are more of your people on Earth." She shook her head. "Not here. Far away. But water connects all worlds. Will they come help us?" Sunhai lowered her hands. The water droplets dispersed into the night air like fading stars. Hope. Message travels slow. They returned to the jeep to sleep. As Taiwan drifted off, he wondered what would happen when they reached the research facility tomorrow. Would Jaihu believe them? Would he help them? "Taiwan," Sunhai said softly in the darkness. "Thank you. Most humans would not help." "I'm a scientist," he replied, though he knew that wasn't the whole reason. "I want to understand." "Understanding comes," she said. "But first, we must survive coal hunters." In the distance, they heard the thrum of helicopter blades cutting through the night air, searching. The mountain research facility loomed ahead, a collection of gray buildings surrounded by high fences. Taiwan parked the jeep in the forest, hidden from view. They had been watching the facility for hours, and what they saw worried them. "Something is wrong," Taiwan whispered. Through his binoculars, he could see unusual activity. Men in black suits moved around the compound. And there, in the center courtyard, sat a craft that matched Sunhai's drawings of coal ships. "Coal already here," Sunhai said, her silver eyes darkening with fear. "Your friend inside?" "Yes. Major Jihu Park. He's my best hope for help." Taiwan lowered the binoculars. There must be another way in. Sunhai closed her eyes, focusing. Feel water underground. Old tunnels. Water pipes. Service tunnels, maybe. Taiwan nodded. Many old military facilities have them. They circled the perimeter, staying hidden in the trees. Behind the main building, they found what looked like an old drainage outlet built into the hillside. The rusty metal grate was partly broken. "Can you fit?" Taiwan asked, pulling at the loose section. Sunhai nodded. She was thin and moved with that strange fluid grace. She slipped through the opening easily. Taiwan followed with more difficulty, tearing his jacket in the process. Inside, the tunnel was dark and damp. Their flashlight cast weak light on concrete walls covered in moss. They moved slowly, following the sound of running water. "Your head hurt?" Sunhai asked suddenly, touching her own temple. Taiwan realized he did have a headache forming. A little. "Why?" "Coal technology," she explained. "Disrupts water connection. Hurts me worse than you." They reached a heavy metal door at the end of the tunnel. The electronic lock had long since stopped working, its wires green with corrosion. Sunhai placed her palm against the damp wall beside it. Water began to seep from the concrete, finding pathways into the lock mechanism. Within moments, they heard a click. The door opened to a basement storage area. Above them, they could hear voices, some human, others with the strange grinding quality of cold speech. Sunhai winced in pain. "Their machines block my abilities," she whispered. "Hard to connect with water here." Taiwan led them through the maze of corridors, avoiding security cameras when possible. He had visited Jihu here once before and remembered parts of the layout. They found Jihu's private lab locked but unguarded. Sunhai managed to open this door too, though it clearly caused her pain to use her abilities. As the door clicked open, Taiwan braced himself, unsure what they would find inside. Jihu spun around as they entered, a gun appearing in his hand. When he recognized Taiwan, his eyes widened in shock. "Taiwan, what are you doing here?" He lowered the weapon, then noticed Sunhai. "And who? What is that?" She's why I'm here, Taiwan said quickly. And why those things outside are here too. Jiahu pressed a button on his desk, activating what he called a security bubble. The air hummed faintly. We have 5 minutes before the system detects this, he said. Talk fast. Sun Hai removed her sunglasses, revealing her silver eyes. Jihu stepped back, his scientific training battling with shock. I am protector, she said. Your oceans hold keystone species. Keystone species, Jihu repeated. You mean ecologically important organisms. More important than you know. Taiwan cut in. Show him what they're really doing here, Jihu. Jihu hesitated, then turned to his computer. 3 days ago, these diplomatic visitors arrived. They offered technology in exchange for marine sampling rights. He pulled up a video file. This is what sampling looks like. The screen showed a large tank containing what appeared to be dolphins. Strange machines surrounded the tank. Coal figures moved around it, extracting glowing blue material from the clearly distressed animals. The animals died within hours, Jihu said grimly. Whatever they're taking, it kills the host. Sun Hai washed, her face showing deep pain. Quantum essence extraction, she said. They take the connection. Connection to what? Taiwan asked. Everything, Sun Hai replied. Her hands formed shapes in the air, trying to express a concept too complex for her limited human vocabulary. Space threads, time threads, all life connected by water. Jihu looked skeptical. You're saying water somehow connects. What? Different parts of the universe. Yes. Sun Hai nodded eagerly. Water remembers. Water connects worlds. Some animals, whales, certain fish, tiny ocean life. They hold connections stronger. Keystone species maintain balance across star systems. And the coal harvests this connection. Taiwan asked. Sell it, Sun Hai confirmed. For weapons. For travel between stars. For power. Always destruction follows. That's why your people protect ocean worlds, Taiwan realized. You're not just protecting the species themselves. You're protecting something cosmic. A warning light flashed on Jihu's security panel. Someone's coming. He moved quickly to a wall panel and pressed a hidden switch. There's something you need to see. The panel slid aside, revealing a small, secure room. Inside stood a tank containing a swirling, luminescent substance, neither fully liquid nor gas. 3 days ago, before the coal landed, this appeared in our deepest ocean monitoring station, Jihu explained. It rose to the surface on its own, almost like it wanted to be found. Sun Hai approached the tank, her silver eyes wide with recognition. Ocean's heart, she whispered. Defense measure. What is it? Taiwan asked. Living water, Sun Hai said with reverence. When oceans threatened, they create conscious defense. Very rare, very powerful. She placed her hands on the tank. The substance moved toward her touch, pulsing with increasing brightness. With this, she said, we can fight coal. Send message to my people faster. The lab door shuddered under sudden impact. Security override codes beeped on the keypad outside. There's a way out through here, Jihu said, opening a hidden door behind the tank room. He pressed a data drive into Taiwan's hand. Everything I've documented. The world needs to know what these visitors really want. Come with us, Taiwan urged. Jihu shook his head. Someone has to explain what's happening. There are good people here who will listen. As Taiwan and Sun Hai escaped with the tank of living water, they heard the lab door break open behind them. Jihu's voice echoed down the corridor, shouting warnings about the true nature of Earth's distinguished visitors. Morning lights sparkled on the small mountain lake where Taiwan and Sun Hai had made their stand. 2 days had passed since they escaped the research facility with the strange glowing water that Sun Hai called Ocean's Heart. News reports claimed a tragic accident had killed several scientists, including Major Jihu Park. Taiwan knew better. Is it ready? He asked, watching Sun He kneel by the lake's edge. She nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the water's unusual glow. They had carefully poured the living water into the lake yesterday. Overnight, it had spread throughout the small body of water, transforming the ordinary lake into something alive and aware. "Lake understands," Sun He said. "It will help us." Taiwan checked their few defenses, pathetic against what they faced, but all they had: his friend's gun, some tools from the jeep, and a makeshift signal booster they had built using parts from Sun He's pod and Jihu's data drive. "Will your people receive the message?" he asked. "Hope so," Sun He replied. "Water heart makes signal stronger, faster." The sound reached them before they saw anything, a low humming that made the air vibrate. Taiwan's teeth ached from the sound. Sun Hai winced in pain. "They're coming," she said, wading into the glowing lake. The water seemed to embrace her, swirling around her body and illuminating her skin from within. 3 small craft appeared over the trees, angular black shapes that hurt the eyes to look at directly. They descended toward the lake, hovering just above the tree line. "Stay back," Sun Hai told Taiwan. "Water will protect me." The lead craft landed near the shore. 4 Cole emerged, no longer wearing their human disguises. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in dark, segmented armor. Their elongated heads housed multiple eyes that glowed with cold intelligence. One carried a device that emitted a high-pitched tone. Sun Hai cried out, sinking deeper into the water. "What is that thing doing to her?" Taiwan whispered to himself, gripping Jihu's gun. The lead Cole spoke, its words translated by a device at its throat. "Protector, you caused trouble for nothing. Your death approaches." Taiwan stepped forward, positioning himself between the aliens and the lake where Sun Hai struggled. "This is our world. You have no right to take anything from it." The coal made a sound like stones grinding together. Laughter, perhaps. "Rights? Meaningless. Your leaders already agreed to our terms. Earth's oceans now serve greater purpose." "They don't know what you really want," Taiwan said. "You're not taking samples. You're stealing something that will destroy our oceans." "Semantics," the coal replied. "We harvest resources lesser species waste. Your quantum-linked organisms are wasted on this primitive world." The device's pitch increased. Sun He's face showed pain, but she pressed deeper into the glowing water. "Your governments were easily convinced," the coal continued. "Technology in exchange for sampling rights. They believe we take only specimens. They do not understand we take the connection itself." Taiwan raised the gun. "And when our oceans die, when all marine life disappears." The coal's eyes pulsed. "Not our concern. Many worlds have resources. When one is empty, we find another." Behind Taiwan, the lake's glow intensified. Sun Hai was now submerged to her shoulders, her eyes closed in concentration. "The protectors are persistent but few," the lead call said. "They cannot stop progress." Suddenly, the disruption device sparked and died. The coal operating it hissed in surprise. Sun Hai rose from the water, her entire body glowing, eyes blazing silver. "You underestimate water," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "Water remembers. Water adapts." The lake around her began to move in impossible ways, rising in columns, forming patterns in midair. The coal stepped back, raising weapons. "Disruption field failing," one reported. "Unknown interference." "Kill them both," the leader ordered. Taiwan fired at the nearest disruption device, hitting it squarely. The explosion knocked 2 coal backward. What happened next occurred too quickly to follow. The lake water responded to Sun Hai's commands, forming shields against energy weapons, then striking out with powerful jets that knocked the coal invaders off their feet. Where the water touched their armor, it seemed to dissolve the alien material like acid. The lead coal fought free and aimed its weapon at Taiwan. Before it could fire, Sun He gestured sharply. A column of water struck the alien with such force that it was thrown against its own craft, its body cracking. "This water has adapted to your biological signature," Sunhai said, her voice carrying that strange resonance. "The ocean's heart remembers its enemies." The remaining coal retreated to their craft, but the engines failed to start. Water had somehow infiltrated their systems. Sunhai turned to Tadwan, her expression both triumphant and sad. Message sent. Connection established. The glow from her body was fading, transferring back to the lake, which now pulsed with rhythmic light. "What did you do?" Taiwan asked, moving to support her as she stumbled from the water. "Gave my energy to amplify signal," she explained weakly. "Worth it. They heard us. Your people are coming." Sunhee nodded, pointing skyward. "Look." Above them, the sky rippled like disturbed water. A circle of blue appeared in the clear morning sky, like a window opening from somewhere impossibly distant. "How long?" Tadwan asked. "Soon," Sunhai whispered, leaning against him. "But Cole will send more. Many more. We must hold this place until my people arrive." The lake continued to pulse with light, sending its message to the stars. Around them, the damaged coal craft began to emit warning signals of their own. The battle had just begun. Taiwan looked at Sunhai, this alien who had changed everything he thought he knew about the universe. "We'll hold," he promised. Together, Taiwan stood at the giant window, looking down at Earth. The blue planet hung in space like a perfect jewel. From here, the oceans that covered most of its surface seemed to glow with life. "Still getting used to space?" Sunhee asked, joining him at the viewpoint. 1 month had passed since the battle at the lake. So much had changed. "A little," Taiwan admitted. "I never imagined I'd be living on a space station." The structure, humans called it Harmony Station, orbited Earth at a point where it could always see the sun. It had appeared suddenly when the Protector fleet arrived, constructed in days using technology humans could barely comprehend. Sunhai looked different now. Her connection to her people had been restored. Her silver eyes were less alien, with visible irises that looked almost human except for their faint glow. She wore the light blue uniform of a Protector ambassador. "The Council meets today?" Taiwan asked. Sunhee nodded. "Final agreement. Earth becomes protected world. Your people join Waterworld's alliance." Below them, a small shuttle departed from the station, heading toward Earth. Cultural exchanges had begun immediately after the truth became known. The cold deception had been exposed when the Protector fleet arrived in force, forcing Earth's governments to acknowledge what they had nearly allowed. "Jehu would have loved to see this," Taiwan said quietly. "His data helped save Earth," Sunhee replied. "Without his evidence, many would not have believed the danger." The official story claimed Jehu had died in a laboratory accident. Only a few knew he had sacrificed himself to give them time to escape with the ocean's heart. His data drive had contained proof of the Coal's true intentions, the systematic extraction of quantum essence that would have left Earth's oceans dead. "My leaders were surprised," Sunhai said after a while. "About what?" "That I survived. That a human helped me without wanting something in return." She turned to face him. "My people have protected Waterworlds for thousands of years, but always from distance. Direct contact was thought too dangerous. And now? Now we see value in working together. Humans have quality Protectors sometimes lack. You act on instinct to help others, even those different from you." She smiled. "You helped me when I was helpless, though I was alien to you." Taiwan shrugged. "I just did what seemed right." A soft chime announced visitors. The doors slid open to admit several people, human diplomats, and their Protector counterparts. Dr. Kim, the lead human diplomat, greeted him. She had once been South Korea's environmental minister. "The signing ceremony is ready. As Earth's first witness to contact with the Protectors, your presence is requested. And as the first Protector to form a true bond with a human," added the tall, elegant alien beside her. "Sunhai's perspective has been invaluable to these negotiations. As they walked toward the council chamber, Sunhai spoke quietly to Taiwan. There is something I haven't told you, something my people discovered when studying Earth's oceans. What is it? Humans are evolving. Very slowly, you develop connection to water. Your myths of water controllers, of people who could speak to oceans, they weren't just stories. The potential exists in your species. Taiwan stopped walking. Are you saying humans might someday do what you do? Sunhai smiled. With time and training, yes. In fact, you have been chosen as first candidate for the attempt. She touched his hand briefly. If you want. The council chamber doors opened before them. Representatives from 27 worlds sat around a massive table made from materials native to each of their planets. At the center sat a container of water, ordinary in appearance but containing samples from every major ocean on Earth. This agreement is bigger than just saving one alien, isn't it? Taiwan said. Sunhee nodded. The Cole understood something important. Everything connects. Oceans, planets, species, galaxies. My people protected these connections but remained separate. You taught us there's another way. They entered the chamber where history would be made. The human representatives looked nervous but determined. The aliens, not just protectors but representatives from other water worlds, regarded them with interest. The lead protector stood. Today we welcome Earth to the Alliance of Water Worlds. For too long, we have watched from afar. Recent events show this approach is no longer effective. The human ambassador replied, Earth thanks you for your intervention. Without you, we would have lost our oceans without ever understanding their true value. Sunhai leaned close to Taiwan. This is just the beginning. Soon, training centers will open on Earth. Humans with water affinity will learn to connect. In time, Earth will have its own protectors. All because you crashed on a beach and I happened to find you. Taiwan said, still amazed by how much had changed in so short a time. Not chance. Sunhee replied. Water guided my pod to you. It knows more than we understand. As the formal agreement was signed, the water at the center of the table rippled slightly. Taiwan felt something strange, a faint tingling in his fingertips, a gentle pull toward the water. When he looked at Sunhai, he knew she had felt it too. First sign, she whispered. Your connection begins. Taiwan looked out the viewport at Earth below, its vast oceans suddenly seeming like something more than just water. They were connections, bridges between worlds, keepers of cosmic balance. And now, humans would learn to understand them as the protectors did. Ready to begin your training? Sunhee asked. Taiwan nodded. Ready. The water in the center of the table rippled again, this time forming a perfect, tiny spiral, responding to him.